Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a Skinner podcast.
General Kelly said he was stunned that Representative Wilson made comments at a building dedication honoring slain FBI agents about her own actions in Congress, including lobbying former President Obama on legislation. As General Kelly pointed out, if you're able to make a sacred act like honoring American heroes all about yourself, you're an empty barrel. If you don't understand that reference, I'll put it a little more simply. As we say in the South, all hat, no cattle.
Yeah. Well, in fact, have you seen the speech?
I have.
And then you know that most of it was her effusively praising these FBI agents. And when she was talking about what she did in Congress, she was not talking about securing the $20 million. She was talking about naming the building for these FBI agents, who she then went on to effusively praise. That was the bulk of the speech.
She also mentioned that, and she also had quite a few comments that day that weren't part of that speech and weren't part of that video that were also witnessed by many people that were there. What General Kelly referenced yesterday.
Tell us specifically, because
exactly what he said. There was a lot of grandstanding. He was stunned that she had taken that opportunity to make it about herself.
Can he come out here and talk to us about this at some point?
I think he's addressed that pretty thoroughly yesterday.
No, he was wrong yesterday in talking about getting the money. The money was
if you want to go after General Kelly, that's up to you. But I think that if you want to get into a debate with a 4-star Marine general, I think that's something highly inappropriate.
It's highly inappropriate to question, the human shield that is John Kelly, who is protecting a narcissist. And I got to tell you, remember I promised you that we were going to find John Gartner, who is the psychologist, the Princeton-educated psychologist, the assistant professor, former assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University, who was part, the author of, part of the author, one of the 27 psychiatrists called... who wrote this book that made it to the New York Times bestseller list called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, and started a group called Duty to Warn John Gartner. And we did find him, and it couldn't come at a better time, truly, because I have told you that I have experienced borderline personality disorder a narcissist like this. I've seen it from beginning to end, and it doesn't end well. This man ended up being hospitalized for his own protection. But duty to warn is a legal term. Duty to warn is a legal term that applies to psychiatrists and psychologists, and they have a legal obligation to warn if the person they're treating seems like they will hurt themselves or they will become violent to others. And that is why this group is called Duty to Warn. And John Gartner is joining us now. Well, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. I was reading the Sunday Times book review, and I saw your book on the bestseller list, and I was like, oh my God.
That's what we said.
Yeah, I mean, it was so appropriate to what I've been thinking. Except that you're a professional. This is what you do. You specialize in this particular thing: borderline personality disorder, sadism, narcissism, and as I said, I've known somebody that suffered from this, and I know that they are contagious. Now, could you explain what I mean by that?
Well, so he is a malignant narcissist, so he has all the symptoms of narcissistic personality, but he also meets full diagnostic criteria for paranoid personality disorder, all his crazy conspiracy theories, his demonization of the press, his demonization of minorities, his demonization of anyone who disagrees with him, like your clip just a moment ago about the congresswoman who exposed his insensitivity. Also antisocial personality disorder, so a complete comfort with lying, and exploiting and violating the rights of others, a lack of remorse or empathy for those people, and as a result, and also sadism, so that they take pleasure in bullying and harming other people. Mm-hmm. And you put those traits together, and you have someone who is very malignant and very destructive, and you're correct, it does not end well. And what I'm concerned about is that right now he is deteriorating. He is actually getting worse. And actually, we predicted this because this is what malignant narcissists typically do. When they do get power, instead of pivoting and becoming more presidential, they actually become more extreme. They become more extreme in their grandiosity, more extreme in their paranoia, more extreme in their reckless, destructive behavior. Combined with that, I think he's having some organic brain deterioration. His vocabulary, his capacity to think and reason is much diminished from what it once was, which also puts him in a sort of downward spiral. Now, at this point, I think we are actually facing the greatest psychiatric emergency in American history, maybe in world history, because we are now getting cries of alarm from the Republican Party
Right.
and from the White House. So this is no longer a partisan issue. It's Bob Corker, has said that he's unstable.
Yes.
He's putting us on the path to World War III, and that with a few exceptions, the majority of his caucus agrees with him. That is a whistleblower. What he is saying is the majority of Republicans believe that he is mentally unfit, disordered, and dangerous.
They
and
have
people
said
within the
that.
White House are saying the same thing.
That's right. And what's really interesting is the leaking that is happening is coming from the people in the White House around him. And
It's a cry for help.
Yes, and they are trying to let the Republicans in the Senate know that this man is unstable. He's unraveling. Bob Corker not only said, after Charlottesville that he doesn't have the maturity but then went on to say, after he said fire and fury about North Korea and all this, that, this man is unraveling. He's unstable. And most everyone knows it. That's what scared me was, Corker didn't stop at, I think he could cause World War III, but most everyone knows it, meaning his Republican colleagues know it. And the amount of chicken crap that goes on, with worrying about Steve Bannon primary and all the whole political part of it is it pales in comparison to the
That's right.
I can't understand. I mean, listen, I was no fan of George Bush. I didn't think he was a smart.
Right.
I didn't think he was a smart man. I thought he was easily manipulated. I think that he was, good at distorting, information. I think Dick Cheney was kind of borderline evil, and I think that Don Rumsfeld was kind of a sadist too, with the torture and all that stuff. But I never felt that George Bush was anything but being manipulated and kind of on the silly, dumb side. And his brother was probably the smarter of the two. His own mother had said it, but nobody reached out to, try and impeach George Bush from the Republican Party.
Right.
And now you see Susan Collins getting caught on a hot mic. She's saying, he's crazy. And, I'm afraid of him. I'm worried. You've got, all these Republicans coming forward saying things about he's imploding, he's unraveling, he's unstable, he's, there's something wrong. So you started Duty to Warn, which, as I said, before I brought you on, is a legal term.
Yes.
And it applies to your profession. Why?
Well, it originated with a lawsuit where a patient told his therapist he was going to kill his girlfriend. The therapist didn't warn her, and he killed her. And at that point, it became the law and part of our ethical code in almost every state that it's in the ethical code of every state, but it's actually in the law of most states, that if you have reason to believe or suspect that someone that you're treating could be dangerous to someone, you have to warn that person. Now, people who are very concrete and legalistic like to point out, no, I'm not treating Donald Trump. Therefore, it is not exactly the same duty. But it is the same principle, and it is multiplied by millions and millions of potential victims. I really want your listeners to write this down, okay? Ted Lieu has introduced a bill, House Resolution 669, which would take away from Donald Trump the capacity to launch a first nuclear strike. It would require Congress to authorize a first nuclear strike. Because right now, Donald Trump has got a gun to our head.
Yeah, and I'm not...
To the world's head.
I think, our audience is smarter than the average bear, but I don't know how many people understand, because we haven't really, specifically drilled down on this, but that the President of the United States, all by himself, all alone, can launch a nuclear strike. Other than that,
it's not that much harder. It's not that much harder than his launching a tweet.
It's like that Stephen King novel, Dead Zone. I mean, it's just so creepy. But anyway, I don't know that people understand that the president can do that without Congress.
I think most people do not understand.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that they don't realize how much danger they are truly in.
Yeah.
So our duty to warn, such as it existed when we began this movement. Now it's time to turn the volume up to 10, because now the thing that we're warning about is, I think, actually truly imminent danger. I honestly believe, and I'll explain it sounds dramatic, but I will justify it. I honestly believe that he is far more probable to push the button than not, based on his psychopathology, based on the fact that malignant narcissistic leaders always make war with the full power of their armamentarium, and based on the fact that he is a cornered animal right now with this Mueller investigation. He's guilty of sin. They're closing in on him and his family. And I'm telling you, this guy's going to shoot his way out. And he's going to try to regain the position of power by being the attacker rather than the prosecuted. And he's going to try to distract the country with a war. And he's going to wag the dog kind of phenomenon to distract them from his wrongdoing. So this law could make the difference between whether your grandchildren get to have grandchildren. It's that important. We have to take the gun out of his hands. And that is this. We only need 19 Republicans to vote for it, and we can take the gun out of his hands. They know he's unfit.
Yeah.
They know he's dangerous. They know that the world, life on Earth, hangs in the balance. They know that they should just do the right thing and put that under congressional authority. It's not even an anti-Trump bill. It's not even going to anger his followers. It's just Congress asserting its power against the executive branch and saying, if we have the power to declare war, that means we have the power to declare a first nuclear strike.
Right. Right. Now, there are people in your profession who are pushing back, against what you are doing, which is diagnosing, a person that isn't in your office. And, I looked at the Goldwater rule to see what it was because I was reading about you. And it turns out that Barry Goldwater was successfully able to sue the American Psychiatric Association because they tried to diagnose him from afar. And so since 1973, there's this principle in your profession that says that you don't diagnose somebody from afar. But, Justin Frank used to be on this show all the time when Bush was... Bush on the couch.
We just had a duty to warn meeting in Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
and Justin Frank was one of our speakers.
Oh, how is he? He's such a good...
great.
Yeah, he's a great man. So he wrote Bush on the Couch, and, we discussed some of the, complexes Bush had growing up and the daddy thing and all that. But I know what a narcissist is. Unfortunately, I do. And, your profession had this conference with like 1,000, professionals there who specialize in, this kind of thing. And they were debating it, and they said, oh, well, the reason why we have the Goldwater rule is because Barry Goldwater was able to successfully sue us. So it's more of a fear of being sued and a fear of being
cover your ass.
Yeah, and a fear of being punished with reimbursements to
Yes. You read that in the New Yorker.
Yeah,
I'm glad
I
that
did.
was finally exposed.
Yeah.
And I was glad that John Zinner, one of our speakers from Washington, was the one who exposed it. Everyone thinks they're coming from this high and mighty position. In fact, behind closed doors, they said we don't want to antagonize the administration. They might reduce our third-party reimbursement. The APA is a guild organization, and they protect the guild of psychiatry. They do not protect the American public. And if there is a conflict, they will go with the guild every time. They always have.
I know.
Look at their whole history of relationship with Big Pharma. It's one sacrificing the public for their corrupt financial interests and that of the industry they're allied with time and time again. So these are not the people from Mount Sinai to tell us what to do.
Right. I mean, it's one of those doctor's things where no doctor has ever done anything, harmful, even though, you do have, prescriptions being written like crazy by, pain management specialists and all that. So, yeah, I get it. When I figured out that it was a guild and I figured out that, you had this meeting and they actually gave voice to the idea that, our reimbursements will suffer or, Barry Goldwater was successful in his lawsuit, then it became very clear why they're pushing back against you. But there's another guy that actually disagrees with you. He's probably your biggest critic. He's a guy named
Al Francis.
Yes. Now, he wrote the guidelines for diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder, and he rejects the claim.
But he says he did.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's the committee. So I have to say this. He's being very narcissistic in even saying that.
Well, I just wanted to share this with you, okay? Because Dr. Francis alleges that unless Trump doesn't believe a word he's saying, then really, he needs to show that he does believe it and he's completely disconnected from reality. That is not my experience with a world heavyweight champion narcissist with borderline personality disorder who literally imploded upon himself and had delusions and drove from the Midwest to New York City, believing that he had a big job that only he could fill, and he was on his way there. And he actually did do this, and then got into a fight with a police officer when he was found sleeping in his car, and kicked the police officer, who then had him, committed. And he understood that he was in trouble. And the thing was, when the person felt his feelings for the first time, he imploded. He just could not deal with all his feelings. So I disagree with him that he has to believe that he's lying. This guy, I'm telling you, and the
well, look, either way, if he believes the crazy things he's saying, then he has a delusional disorder, which means he is psychotic, which is now a whole other level of severity.
But that was the end. That was the end stage.
Psychotic.
That was a very end stage.
Right. I do believe that he is psychotic. He has what we call transient psychotic symptoms that we see in personality disorders, where they can bend reality to their fantasies and needs. And so he had the biggest crowd size. Because he has to be the best, he has to have had the biggest crowd size. So there is a kind of a delusional quality. But if he were just lying, then he would be an antisocial personality disorder. Either way, he meets criteria for a severe and serious and dangerous disorder.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the idea that, whether we care if he knows he's lying or he's not lying, it doesn't matter to me. He's the president of the United States. He's got a really distorted view of the world. But the thing that makes me believe that he truly is a diagnosable sadist/narcissist/borderline personality disordered person is the fact that he is contagious, meaning everyone around him. Now you have General John Kelly lying for him and making himself into a liar at the behest of his boss, who is a narcissist. That is exactly the experience that I've seen, where narcissists they have like this lane that they're good in. They're niched out people, and they're very, very good at what they do in their lane. The second they get out of their lane, like for instance, Trump was probably very good at licensing his name. Okay, this is what he's good at, and laundering money. Perhaps he's very good at it, but he's not good. He's not.
Takes a lot of talent to launder money.
I mean, his whole experience with the banks not lending to him. So where did he get his money? That's another subject for a different expert. But the idea that he was very good in his niched out lane, that he had 60 employees, and yet when he talks to the media, he says he hired tens of thousands of people. Right there. I mean, and then he gets out of his lane, and he's now the president of the United States, and he is managing an awesome government, okay? An intelligence community, and a defense community, and a State Department, and a Congress, and a Senate, and all these moving parts. And he's clearly out of his lane and clearly over his head. And yet he can get people who know that to lie for him. That is a very specific thing that...
Right, he is so toxic that everyone around him essentially is sort of like, it's a Midas touch reverse. Like everyone around him, their kind of soul withers. Like they're having their soul sucked out by a Dementor or something in Harry Potter.
Yes, Yes, it is that. It really is that feeling. And these people are turning themselves into gigantic world heavyweight champion liars. And the feeling some have is that John Kelly is doing it because it's his duty to protect us from the bad Donald Trump man. And yet, if John Kelly and the rest of the cabinet would, get real and stop being infected by him, they would invoke the 25th Amendment, okay?
Well, they're the ones who actually have the authority to do that, and we have a petition with 65 that we directed towards mental health professionals with 65,000 signatures that we've sent to every member of the cabinet. Not that should be their deciding factor, but to make it clear to them that there is professional consensus that this president is truly mentally unfit and dangerous, and that it is their responsibility in seeing that to be the ones to take action under the 25th Amendment. I was actually just meeting with Representative Jamie Raskin earlier this afternoon. Representative Raskin actually spoke at our
you met him today?
in Washington. Yeah, I just came back. In fact, I was worried I was going to be late to speak to you because I hit traffic coming back from Washington. But I was going to have to pull over into like a Wendy's or something. But he's the sponsor of House Resolution 1987, which is an attempt to operationalize the 25th Amendment. That in the situation that there was a serious question of a president's mental capacity, that there would be a a bipartisan or nonpartisan commission of psychiatrists, medical doctors, retired politicians from both parties that could really make an objective, consensual assessment of his fitness for office.
Yeah,
so
Jamie Raskin, for those of you who don't know, he is a Democrat from Maryland, and he has a resolution, 1987, that's right, and he is trying to put up set up a commission of professionals, of psychiatrists, psychologists, of medical professionals to decide whether or not the president is fit, and invoke the 25th Amendment. It's a long shot, but it's an effort. So you know what? I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the trigger for this man? I mean, how much longer before he, decides to lash out?
Yeah. Well, look, I really think that people need to understand, and this is my honest professional assessment, that he is a ticking time bomb. That we are actually living in real life that show 24, where if we can't solve the mystery by, the end of the time period, there's some bombs going to go off in Times Square. He is a ticking time bomb. I think people really need to understand not only that he has the capacity to launch on a whim, but he is sick enough to do it. And in fact, so sick that it is actually the type of thing he would do. And he's deteriorating, and he's under stress from an investigation which is essentially fatal to him, his administration, and his family. And I'm telling you, this is a very dangerous combination. And talk about things not ending well. We really need to take the gun out of his hands. We need to take the nuclear missiles out of his hands. It could be the last thing we ever do if we don't succeed in doing this.
I will make sure that each and every person who is listening, every single person who is in our chat room, every single person who is listening on a podcast, that they all call their Congress member and they all call their senator, and that they ask to please take the nuclear option away from the president and put it back to, not back, but give it to Congress.
Yes.
All right. The book is called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. One of the authors, John Gartner, also has a group that you can join, that you can watch, that you can, get updates from, called Duty to Warn. And, of course, they are trying to get a commission set up to get Congress to start thinking about invoking the 25th Amendment. Listen, I'm so glad you didn't have to do this from a Wendy's. Thank you for taking your time. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. Give Justin Frank my very best.
I will.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Can you believe this? Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.